Labadiena, su jumis laida Delfi tema ir žurnalistas Vaidas Saldžiūnas. Šiandien mes toliau kalbame apie karą Ukrainoje ir kalbame su Junktinių Amerikos valstijų ambasadoriumi Michaeliu Carpenteriu, kuris yra ambasadorius Europos saugumo ir bendradarbiavimo organizacijai. Ambassador Carpenter, so good to have you here.
It's good to be with you.
We talked about almost 5 years ago in Vilnius, and back then we talked a lot about Russia, Ukraine, obviously, since previously you worked in Obama administration. Back then you admitted to me that there was some naiveness regarding the Russian long-term trajectory, especially the reset policies. Now, things obviously changed with the current administration. Since December, we've seen much clearer and tougher the Biden administration stance on Russia regarding that only possible invasion of Ukraine. We've seen unprecedented sharing of information, intelligence information. Now we have seen sanctions, arms flowing to Ukraine. There's an allied unity. We've seen all that. But what I want to ask you is about the reason for this war. We seem not to know that. We know the limited goal of 2014 Russian operation and occupation of Crimea, attempt to grab Donbass as well. We know they have more ambitious goals to grab potentially the whole Ukraine now and to topple the government in Kiev. And those axes of attacks of Russian advance seem to prove that. But what's the reason for this whole war? Do you see it?
Well, it's not really for me as an American diplomat to speculate on the reasons that are inside President Putin's head. But I will tell you that it seems readily apparent that the Kremlin wants to subjugate Ukraine. They want to subjugate all of it. And President Putin has spoken openly about his desire to recreate the Russian Empire from more than 100 years ago, which is a truly frightening thought if you think about the extent of those borders from, say, the early 20th century. And so I can only take him at his word. I don't know what else is behind that thinking or that rhetoric, but that is what is being stated officially from Moscow. We had Foreign Minister Lavrov said that and I'm quoting almost literally, that the United States took Ukraine from Russia. I mean, it's just a fantastical statement to make, as if we could take anything. I mean, this is independent Ukraine that he's talking about. And yet that is how he articulated his views.
Mr. Ambassador, let me put it this way. Russia was warned about the possible consequences, and those consequences are already hurting Russia. Ukraine was given military support before the war and is given during the war now. Yet Mr. Putin chose to escalate nonetheless, is not afraid of any repercussions. What does that tell you? Does Russia have a plan that we may not be aware of?
Well, I don't know, but what I can tell you is that it means that the Russian Federation has broken literally all norms of civilized international conduct. It has broken all the cardinal principles of the UN Charter, of the Helsinki Final Act, and of every subsequent document that has ever been agreed either in the OSCE or NATO, or the NATO-Russia Council, I should say. So we've broken through all the norms. There's no more respect for borders. There's no more respect for sovereignty. And it seems like they don't even pretend anymore, because there was no real pretext for this invasion. We here at the OSCE and our colleagues at NATO had proposed all kinds of different discussions and made overtures to the Russian side, and they rejected all of it. So I think it just proves that the Kremlin, just through its naked aggression, wanted to control Ukraine, and perhaps more than just Ukraine.
Right. I understand the diplomats are professional people, but just before the war, just before this war began, you and other U.S. diplomats have engaged and talked to the Russians, and may that be one-way street of talking. Nonetheless, there was hours and hours of talks. Russians call that negotiations. But did you get the impression, or do you still get the impression, that they knew what was about to happen, or it was all kept, as you say, in Putin's head? Did they make any attempts, genuine attempt to avoid all this, or did you stall?
There was no real, to answer your question, there was no real engagement on any of the topics that were proposed for discussion, whether it be arms control, reciprocal limitations, whether it be military transparency measures or confidence building measures. There was zero interest in that. When we convoked meetings of the Vienna document, which is an OSCE military transparency measure, Russia boycotted all 4 meetings that were held, literally the week before they launched their war on Ukraine. So it seems like they were never really interested in diplomacy from the very beginning. But I would also note that the Russian ambassador here to the OSCE was talking about the implementation of the Minsk agreements literally the day before Russia launched its invasion. So I'm not sure whether that speaks to either his complete ignorance of what was about to happen or just a complete lack of proper preparation of a pretext, because they violated every element of Minsk, of course.
Right. Well, the Russians seems to be using completely ludicrous pretexts, and they're using rhetoric. But I have to ask, does it tickle you a bit, or anyone you know in the administration, that Russia is using such rhetoric as regime change, obstructing to acquire WMDs, defending the people from genocide? I mean, the wording that we've seen back in 2002, 2003, before the operation in Iraq.
Well, the language that is coming from Moscow is absolutely ridiculous and ludicrous and beyond the pale. I mean, it barely even deigns a response. But to take a word like genocide, which is so loaded, and to manipulate it and twist it when there is absolutely not just no evidence, it's just patently false that there is such a thing going on the Ukrainian side. However, when you look at what the Russians are doing, I mean, it doesn't go into that territory, but clearly we can talk about gross violations of human rights, targeting of civilian populations, civilian infrastructure already, and we're only on the 7th day of the war. So it's just the rhetoric is over the top. But one thing I'll tell you is that, I think I've never seen the Euro-Atlantic community so united as it is now. I mean, even some of the countries, I won't name them, but some of the countries in our alliance or that are close partners that were very reluctant to admit that Russia could possibly engage in aggression are just calling it like they see it. They are now clearly seeing what everybody else is seeing. Right.
Well, let's talk about OSCE. This organization is concerned with the early warning, conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict rehabilitation, especially in Europe, given that most of the countries are in Europe. Now, there's been a lot of talk of entering new area with this war of international relations, and that this war in Ukraine is a danger to the security of Europe as a whole. What fallout do you think this war will bring, and what role, if any, will there be for the OSCE or other organizations where Russia has voice?
Well, there will be a lot of fallout, and I think we're going to be engaging in a complete paradigm shift in terms of our engagement with Russia going forward. First of all, the notion that held sway for many decades that interdependence with Russia and that closer economic relations would somehow result in a moderation of the Kremlin's behavior over time have clearly proven false. And so what it means for the OSCE, I don't know. I mean, Russia is a member, and this remains a platform where potentially in the future there could be dialogue between the West and Russia. But for now, it's impossible because missiles are falling, civilians are being killed, kindergartens, children's hospitals are being targeted by Russia as we speak. So I don't know what there is to discuss right now. But by the way, early warning was invoked by the OSCE. If you look at my statements over the last 2 months, you will see that almost every single week, I warned that Russia was planning war. And so we did use the organization to sound the alert. But unfortunately now, despite all that, we find ourselves in a situation of the biggest land war in Europe since World War II.
Right. Well, let me put this question a bit further. What do you think is the future of Russian membership in the OSCE? When Lavrov spoke in Geneva, there was a walkout of dozens of diplomats.
There was here too. In fact, there were two walkouts. Right. When the Russian ambassador first spoke here, everybody walked out of the room, and the same was true when he took the floor, or his deputy, I should say, took the floor the following week.
So there were walkouts. Do you see Russia at the table of an OSCE in the future?
Well, we'll have to see. I think it would be premature right now to consider an OSCE without Russia, because one of the advantages of this platform is that it brings every single voice to the table, literally from Vancouver and the United States all the way to Russia, Mongolia, and Central Asia. There is value potentially in the future in having this platform. It's just that right now, while we're in the middle of this barbaric war being perpetrated by Russia, it's hard to see how this organization can foster dialogue or meaningful dialogue.
Right. Well, a couple of days ago in your speech, you said words spoken by the Russian Federation representative have no meaning. And again, I quote you, how did we reason with a regime that claims Ukrainian nation does not exist? How did we reach agreements with the Russian Federation so blatantly and brutally violates international law? Do you have the answers for yourself to those questions?
No, I don't. That's why I pose those questions, because it is a real question of how can you enter into an agreement, any type of agreement, with a regime that consistently breaks agreements? How can you even have a discussion when the other side is mounting lie after lie after lie? It's very hard to have what we call a rational discourse with that type of an actor. And so, I don't know where this leads us from here. It leads us into potentially a very dark place. But for now, at least, I think we have to preserve the institution.
What do you mean by very dark place? I mean, what does that mean really? When you can't talk to the Russians, do you put the hope for the future, or do you just put everything on hold and see where it goes from here?
Well, I think we have to signal very clearly that if the time comes, and I don't know when it might come, but if the time comes where the Russian side is willing to talk about a peaceful resolution of this settlement and stop its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, then we should be open to that. We should seek to save lives and stop bloodshed. So that's a very important point. But by the same token, it is hard to see how in the current environment we could work on building confidence or transparency or trust when they've been so ripped asunder by the Russian Federation.
Right. Well, as you put it so eloquently, we were watching sieges of Kharkiv, Kiev, Mariupol, other cities that suffer under the siege and constant Russian bombardment as we speak. There's one growing question. How long will the West going to take it? How long will it keep watching it, only watching it? Obviously, it reacted with interference, no-fly zones and similar atrocities in former Yugoslavia, Libya, Syria. We saw that. And there's a clear refusal to repeat that or getting involved in the same manner. Now, former Lithuanian President Dalia Grybauskaitė today said that sanctions and all those measures that are being taken today aren't enough to stop the slaughter. And war can be stopped only with war, whether we like it or not. Europe is already at war. Mr. Ambassador, Russia is saying that sanctions, lethal military aid to Ukraine is already involvement. So how long do you think this thin red line will be kept, and can there be done anything to stop this madness?
Well, what I will say is that the United States is not going to enforce a no-fly zone, because that would involve military confrontation between U.S. troops, in this case pilots, and Russian pilots. And that, that's a recipe for a war between nuclear powers, and nobody wants that.
Right.
Trust me, nobody wants that. However, I will also say that the sanctions that we have imposed just in the last 3 or 4 days on the Russian Federation, including disconnecting them from the SWIFT banking system, putting full blocking sanctions on all transactions, not just by the central bank, but by all of the major Russian banks, which transact in trillions of dollars worth of volume every day. I mean, this is unprecedented. This is not just double or triple or quadruple what we did in 2014. This is orders of magnitude stronger than anything we even contemplated in the past. And so while it is probably not going to stop the Russian bombardment, as you say, and the bloodshed in the coming days, I would predict that in a few months, the Russian economy is going to be in tatters. This is going to be a complete game changer. And that's why we also said consistently before this conflict even began, that should the Kremlin be considering war, that it would be a strategic catastrophe above all for Russia. And I still believe that that is the case.
Right. Well, you said couple months, so should then Ukraine prepare for couple months of bloodshed then? By West doing literally just sanctioning, however harsh that is, but nonetheless, it doesn't stop the aggression.
Well, so to be fair, the West is not just sanctioning. Western nations are providing security assistance to Ukraine. Right. They are providing humanitarian assistance. We've just announced that we've provided $1 billion of direct financial assistance and other forms of assistance to Ukraine in the recent couple months. And I think that assistance will continue to flow. NATO is also fortifying its eastern flank and will continue to do so in the days to come. So the repercussions from this, both diplomatic, political, economic, financial, military, are immense. So I don't know if it is a matter of months, but specifically just on the economy, it could be a matter of weeks. I don't know. I'm not enough of an economic expert to know how quickly this will bite.
Do you have any thoughts of how this bloody war will end?
I don't. I will repeat my call for Russia to stop the bloodshed, stop the madness, stop the bombing, pull back your troops. President Putin, this is a catastrophe for everybody. It is a complete premeditated but unprovoked war. It is a war of choice. And all it takes is one man in the Kremlin to stop it. But I can't predict for you because I am not in that person's mind. I can't read it for you.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for this interview. Mes kalbėjome su JAV ambasadoriumi Europos saugumo ir bendradarbiavimo organizacijoje Michaeliu Carpenteriu. Ačiū žiūrėjusiems, likite sveiki.